Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, we're going to talk about more things we don't want to talk about. Antony, Sancho, but also the some of the midfield plans for next summer and United's recruitment, and a bit more. So let's get right into it. Okay, so obviously, number one, over the weekend, United made the decision that Antony would not return to the team at the moment while he deals with the kind of fallout and situation of the three accusations that are currently being leveled at him. This has been extremely public, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, frankly. I don't think that these things should be judged by you or me or anybody in the public arena. I feel the same way about all of these things. I felt the same thing about Greenwood. I feel the same thing about all of these cases. I think that there's a big problem where, because there is no standard way of dealing with this for the Premier League and for Premier League clubs, that it becomes a very complicated and messy affair. If Antony is defending himself publicly because he feels like that's the only way to save his career, and that's why he's going public, even though it could be to his detriment from a legal standpoint, that's concerning, because it shouldn't have to be that way. Players should not be having to go public to defend themselves in the legal arena if they're innocent, in order to save their careers, because their careers should not be ruled by public sentiment. It's complicated. It's extremely complicated, and it's kind of silly. You know, I said on Twitter a couple times that Antony should stop talking, and I think for whatever reason, people take that kind of statement a certain way. They think that that's a statement of making judgment either way. It's not. I don't personally, because I understand how the law works for the most part, I don't personally find somebody being silent to imply guilt or innocence, and I don't find someone being loud to imply guilt or innocence, but I do know that from a legal perspective, it's often better to be quiet and deal with things the way that you're supposed to. I mean, for example, you know, you have now that Antony has admitted to, grabbing the woman, and it doesn't mean he did anything wrong. But by admitting that, she would have had to prove that he'd have touched her and all sorts of things. And there's a lot of reasons not to talk, and a lot of potential consequences of talking and saying things that otherwise would be on the burden of proof for the accuser to do. And so from a legal perspective, it's usually not the right thing for someone in a situation such as this to be loud. But we don't know. I don't know if the fact that he was talking and that making more noise and such is the reason why he had to stay away. I don't know. I think that the way that it's being dealt with right now is correct. Because he's not suspended, it will allow him to be a way to deal with it. And then he could return should there just not be charges being filed. But it's hard. You don't know the timeline on these things. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I don't know the right answer, to be honest. I think that the right answer for the Premier League is for somebody independent to look at these things and say, all right, while someone is dealing with, say, a charge or an accusation, they should spend the time away to deal with it legally, because having to travel to Brazil, having to talk to police, having to do all this stuff is going to be a distraction. And in that period, they should go take the time and do what they need to do to handle it, if needed, if they plan to respond to it, if they plan to deal with it. Then they should be allowed to play. If charges are then filed, they obviously have to be taking time away when there's things like court and all of that. But then, I don't know. Is it the right thing for people to be suspended if charges are filed because then it meets a certain standard of evidence that casts doubt on whether they should play? Or is it the right thing that they should continue to be able to play unless they are actually convicted of something? I don't know the right answer to that, and it is a tough one, but there has to be a standard. It's not just United, and it's almost unfair that for, a player at Arsenal, they are allowed without any scrutiny to continue on, whereas, United and the players at United are treated differently. And it's kind of ridiculous, actually, that is happening. And I don't know what the answer is, honestly. I really don't. I don't know what the answer is, but somebody from the Premier League or an independent office needs to step in and say, hey, we need a standard practice for dealing with these things. There's a former player who was accused of all of this, of a bunch of stuff. I mean, completely ruined his career. Not at this point in time, I believe all the charges were dropped as well. There really wasn't any public evidence, but he still is not allowed because of the nature of the accusations. But he's not allowed, but he still probably doesn't want to have his face in the public eye at all because of the nature of the accusations. And then there's players where it's happened when nobody acts like anything has happened at all. So there has to be a standard. I don't know what the answer is, but for now, I'm not going to judge on this. I don't think anybody should. Guilty, innocent, doesn't matter. I don't think anybody should. I think the best at the moment is to just let it be dealt with in the legal process. And it's way too complex to try to evaluate evidence and things that are in the public domain, because it's selective. It's, who knows, from all parties. You don't know everything that's going on, positive or negative. And so it's best just to leave these kind of things to the authorities. In the meantime, obviously, you have the whole situation with Jadon Sancho, and I have a couple of feelings about all of that. Number one is, to a large degree, I think the whole situation is a bit overblown. First and foremost, I just want to comment on a slight twist of wording. Please don't believe, Jadon Sancho's statement, if you look at it, the first line says, please don't believe everything you read, okay? And it's hard to know what someone is looking at when they're making a statement, but his first line says, please don't believe everything you read. Later on in his statement, he also says, I respect all decisions that are made by the coaching staff. I play with fantastic players and grateful to do so, which I know every week is a challenge. It's complicated because I almost also even get the impression that there's other things that are being thought of and other perceptions going on. And that's the issue with this kind of stuff, is that there's lots of different perceptions. But I have a couple of thoughts on this. Number one is, if this was in U.S. sports, nobody would care. This kind of thing happens all the time. Players, coaches, managers, owners publicly argue, fight, have issues all the time. And it isn't viewed as this like massive drama or this huge issue that needs constant attention and dealing with. At the end of the day, one of the things that is well known in sports is that winning solves everything, and athletes play and they want to play. And here's the thing, there's too many complications with all of this to say one person is totally right or one person is totally wrong in the whole situation. Players are different. There's stories, Wayne Rooney used to talk about how Sir Alex would go into the dressing room and yell at him because Ronaldo and Nani couldn't handle Sir Alex Ferguson yelling at them. And Ronaldo is one of the greatest players of all time, but he couldn't handle it. Doesn't make a player weak to be personally being dealt with differently. Some players respond well to certain types of tactics. Some players respond well to others. Some players respond well to certain types of man management. And one of the things I do think that Erik ten Hag needs to improve is his man management. I think that That is something that every manager could work on, but it doesn't take the blame away. It doesn't change performances. It doesn't do any of that. But it's best for all parties for this situation to be resolved. For both of them to put this aside, sit down as they are supposed to today, discuss the situation and say, let's just figure it out. Let's just figure it out to get along and work together, because we all should want the same thing. There shouldn't be an internal strife. What do we want? We want to win. We want to win games. We want to perform the best possible. Erik ten Hag needs Jadon Sancho. Jadon Sancho needs Erik ten Hag. A manager needs every tool in his tool shed right now. And Jadon Sancho needs the manager to trust him if he wants to play. Jadon Sancho needs to earn the trust of the manager if he wants to play. They need each other. It should be a symbiotic relationship. And people, I think, should stop playing it up as a war or as something that has to be a conflict. They're on the same team. We should be aiming for, hey, can't these guys figure it out? It doesn't have to be somebody wins this battle. They shouldn't be fighting against each other. Either way, whoever's at fault, it doesn't matter. They still shouldn't be fighting against each other. That's not the opponent. The opponent is the other team. The opponent is everybody they play on the pitch, not each other. And that's one of the things that you can't get wrong on a team is you don't want to start going to war with your own teammates. Either way, you can't do that. That's something you don't want. And so I think that it can be played up too much as a battle that has to be won in there to exert authority, but it doesn't. It doesn't have to go down like that. It can very easily be resolved where two people with the same goals, the same intentions, figure it out, and it doesn't lose the respect of other people. If you've worked in any kind of environment before, you would know that the person in charge, you actually don't lose respect for them when they're able to sort out conflict without just being purely punitive. It's quite the opposite, actually. Managers, bosses, and people who are viewed as punitive often lose the respect of the individuals beneath them. And when they are able to resolve things in a healthy manner, they gain a lot more presence and a lot more respect. And I think that they will. I have a feeling that they will. I don't believe that it's as nearly as dramatic as is being said. That's a lot of that's media and everything. And so we'll see, but they're set to talk today. And I have a strong feeling it'll be resolved and they'll be training like normal in the next few days. And it will be better for the locker room should that happen than some heavy punitive measure. Just understand that is a true statement. It will be better if they resolve it for Erik ten Hag and his authority in that dressing room, if it's not just some big punitive, situation that blows up and results in, something else happening. Okay. Let's move on to some more interesting things now, because it is exhausting talking about all the drama. I'm tired of it, honestly. It's hard making these videos recently. I did a big long video with Phil Brown. We'll be doing that every week. But it's been hard to have motivation to do these videos to just talk about bullshit and drama, especially over the international break. It's exhausting. And so I haven't even felt like making them in the last week because, the last 12, 13 minutes of talking about that, I don't enjoy it. About Antony, about Sancho, about all of it. I really don't enjoy it. And it's tiresome. It is so tiresome. So let me talk about some interesting moves that have been going on. Some interesting things that have been happening is number one, United. This is the things that happen. I talk about some of this on the podcast, but number one, United have been looking at the rebuilding of their midfield, and one of the names that came up that I was told that they've made moves for is Ezequiel Palacios. He is a Argentinian midfielder at Bayer Leverkusen. I don't know a ton about him, but from a lot of the analysis that has come up, he's essentially very similar to Casemiro with a bit more controlled ball retention in terms of passing. I'm not saying he's going to be the guy carrying the ball up the pitch. That's not his point. He tackles really well, and he moves the ball in terms of passing at a high volume without taking a lot of risks. Otherwise, he's extremely similar in many ways to Casemiro. And I think that if you were to look at the way that Erik ten Hag wants to play, his one thing would be, maybe Casemiro being a bit less risky on the ball at times. And it is interesting, but this is a player that's been identified. Obviously, the type of player Casemiro is, the way that Ten Hag's built his midfield, he likes that profile. And this is a player that's been identified by the club that, as I understand it, they attempted to make a deal for. They attempted to make a deal for to get something permanently done next year and even have him on loan this year prior to signing Amrabat. And I think he's a player to keep an eye on for next summer for a potential long-term replacement for Casemiro. And in addition to that, I think that the other aspect of the plans that could happen here is you have obviously Fred departed. You have McTominay, who's very likely to depart, and you have Eriksen, who's going to be moving into the final, latter stages of his career. If you need to replace Casemiro long term, and the idea is to get somebody in potentially before he departs, you need likely Amrabat and this signing, and then somebody else later who plays more of an attacking position. So I don't think this changes, or really, I think it's a separate consideration to the Amrabat thing. There's a very good chance that United will permanently sign Amrabat in the end to replace McTominay, but it's going to depend on his performances. At the same time, I do not believe he is the long-term starter replacement to Casemiro. They are looking for a long-term replacement to Casemiro. It's high up the priorities list. They've got a lot of young players, although we'll see what has to happen in the forward line in terms of signing. Like I said, they've been scouting a right winger and been talking to players. We know about the other positions being targeted, but they are looking at a long-term Casemiro replacement, and that is a name that is coming up. There's some questions on his injury record. They'll see what happens this year, how he does this season, but he's a player I would keep an eye on. Not the only one, but one that I know they were very strongly interested in, and I hadn't seen reported. So that's one name I would keep up with, and then obviously the evaluation of Sofyan Amrabat's performances. I think the plan is to add 2 midfielders, and one of them could be Amrabat in that instance, to rebuild, because they need to replace McTominay and they'll need to long-term replace Casemiro. And the goal is, and this ties into the next point, to start getting players in before they have to perform immediately. And so, a few of the things that are starting to change with the recruitment department that has been rebuilt, even though a lot of the targeting has been Erik ten Hag named so far, but it's starting to shift, and they're really starting to, look at it in more depth for the future. There is 2 major things. Number one, identifying and analyzing targets that fit positions, that fit play styles prior to getting them, that might not be someone just known by a person, like Palacios, like Rasmus Højlund, etc. But then in addition, about getting players in before they're needed. So at right back, instead of holding on to Dalot and Wan-Bissaka forever and then having to sign a right back when it just inevitably falls apart, letting go of one and bringing someone in where you still have Wan-Bissaka that can perform, and having a new right back come in and play for them. Same at center back, signing a starting level center back that can come in and start to compete with Varane, and that way you don't have to instantly get up to speed. As we've seen, it's taken a time on occasion for players to get up to speed. Even Varane, his first season, I don't think was very good. A lot of players weren't, but that can happen. And so the idea is, let's get a right back in before we are desperate. Let's get a midfielder in to replace Casemiro before Casemiro's gone. Let's get a center back in to replace Varane before he's gone. And that's kind of the profile moving forward, so that those players can a little bit more ease their way in, and so that the transfer situation isn't so dire and desperate all the time. And that's a lot of what's being worked on right now for next summer. It's all happening, and it is being looked at for mostly next summer. But this is a bit of the shift that they're attempting to do. And then, the final thing is just obviously, looking forward to the weekend, looking forward to the game at the weekend. What do we expect? Obviously, Antony will not be available. Mason Mount might be, but is likely injured. Amrabat is in, but there's some questions about his fitness. I think what you're going to see is Rashford and Højlund up front almost for sure, right? Based on how things have gone. On the right, is it going to be Sancho? Maybe we'll find out this week based on how things work out. Is it going to be Garnacho? Is it going to be Pellistri? But obviously there's some intrigue there. In the midfield, I wouldn't be surprised if you just see Casemiro, Eriksen, and Bruno. I know that Amrabat is brought in. I know people are expecting him to play a lot. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. Even the way he's been described, he's a rotation for Casemiro. But let's see. I think you're going to get a good picture of that against Brighton about what the plans are. I don't think that Erik ten Hag is necessarily ready to change up his plans that he sees are working, especially with Rasmus Højlund about to come in and wanting to have more and continue to have creativity with someone like Christian Eriksen in there, creating chances for Rasmus Højlund. The back line is whoever's healthy, right? That's been an issue, but Lisandro Martinez is healthy. I think it's still going to be Dalot at left back, Wan-Bissaka at right back, and Lindelof at right center back. So, hopefully we can start to move through this kind of mini injury crisis. Rasmus Højlund coming in, Amrabat coming in, at least gives us more options. They need to resolve this Sancho thing because Antony is not available now. So a lot of question marks still and a lot of things that need to be sorted out. But we're definitely set for an intriguing game. I still think we have enough players to do what needs to be done. But obviously some things to be sorted out and some things we'll learn this week, especially, as I say, with regards to Sancho, with regards to maybe Amrabat, who returned early, and all of that. So that's what I've got for today. I'm sure there'll be more news through the week as we lead up to the end of the international break. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next one.